Welcome to Through the Glass Columns, your weekly Wheel of Time read-along podcast. The Wheel of Time turns and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again.
That is your host, Greg, who somehow still knows very little about the Wheel of Time, even though he usually pretends otherwise.
And that is Tylor, our resident expert, who makes sure you know how much he knows about the Wheel of Time.
It's a lot. Join us each week as we continue our journey through Robert Jordan's great fantasy epic, exploring the books, the television show, ill-advised discussions of visual media on a non-visual podcast, and so much more. Although actually not, it's just that.
Yes, all that and actually nothing else as we travel on, and I know what this means now, through the glass columns.
Yeah, he really doesn't know all that much.
No, you don't know that much. Hello, my friends. Hello. Welcome back to Through the Glass Columns, your weekly read-along Wheel of Time podcast. Tonight, brought to you by Neil Diamond for some reason. Tylor didn't understand that reference.
I did. I just didn't like it.
I, of course, am your host, Greg, who does a different intro every time and is desperately running out of ideas to make them new and different. Joining me, of course, is Tylor, who hates all things good in this life, including but not limited to Neil Diamond. Tylor, how's it going?
It's going very well. I actually was thinking as you were doing that not very good intro that you do a joke before every episode that I can't laugh at because then my laughing would be caught on the episode. And I need you to know I really appreciate that joke. But I did not appreciate the Neil Diamond intro. Don't do something like that again. That was awful. What wasn't awful, however, were these 3 chapters. But I don't know if they were great. I feel like last week we kind of had like this big momentum. We were like, it isn't like big plot movement, but it felt like we were kind of enjoyable, liking the ride. And I kind of felt that at some points this week, and other points I was like, come on, like get to it. Which of those 2 sides were you on, or were you somewhere in the middle like me?
I was more on the second side. It felt like, we just gave the engine a big rev and then it stalled out for a second. And I imagine we'll restart the car and drive again. But I was like, oh, 3 chapters and not a lot. Well, there are some plot things that happened. But interestingly, unless I misunderstood, I think they happened off screen. So we get references to things that seem important. But I didn't feel like I was experiencing anything that I could really say was like, wow, this is so exciting. So a downer week for me, but I still have faith, and we talked about it at the end of last week's show. We're cruising. I mean, I think about 200 pages left in my edition, so we're in the end game now.
Yeah. If you haven't finished all 3 chapters, feel free to disregard this sentence for until you finish the 3 chapters. But we're going to have a rough 3rd chapter discussion for reasons. Chapter 27, To Be Alone. Perrin thinks he is leaving and never coming back. He remembers fighting with Rand over the treatment of the Aes Sedai, and Rand says that they deserve a dungeon and tells Perrin to leave his sight and never come back. Perrin then finds Loial, who says Rand should not have done what he did, and Loial invites Perrin to find waygates with him as he is planning to travel around and identify them so that the Ashaman can close them. Loial is worried about Rand sending everyone away, and he is worried that Rand is hiding things from Min, and so she will be the next to be sent away. Perrin tells Loial to trust no one, and Loial seems distraught to get that response, and then he thinks that he does... And then at this point, Perrin thinks that he doesn't like lying to a friend. He then rides to find Erin and Fail, and along with a number of Aiel and Maidens of the Sword, who are now sworn to Fail's service. Also there are Grady and Nield, 2 of Rand's Ashaman, who don't seem to like bringing the Maidens of the Sword along. Perrin then leads the 2 Rivers men and the Aiel through a gateway, and Perrin asks Grady about his wife, and he gets a very specific response because apparently Grady has bonded his wife. Perrin then notes two Aes Sedai walking through the portal and thinks that they are going to be a problem at some point. Next comes Berelain and her forces, and Perrin says that everyone thinks him banished, but Berelain and everyone thinks Berelain is headed to Mayenne, and the rest seem to have vanished into the night, but they are in Galen, and they are here for the Prophet. Rand wants him under control, and Perrin hopes that all goes well, so he can separate Fail from Berelain as quickly as humanly possible. So, as you mentioned, this is a chapter where things really happen off screen, and this feels almost like a post-credit scene in a Marvel movie. It's like they go through a portal. Where are they? Oh my God, it's Wakanda, and then the credits roll. What was your takeaway from this chapter?
Yeah, I found myself struggling with that decision because to me, if you're going to do that off screen, it's because you have something better to do on screen. And this felt like kind of a nothing burger of a chapter, right? And that could just be my bias against this kind of barreling Fail plot line, if you can even call it a plot line thing that's going on with Perrin in the middle. Like all of that just rings hollow to me. I'm like, oh, well, we still have that going on, but we missed a confrontation between Rand and Perrin. And, you know, there's been so much talk and different prophecies about like the two of them needing to stay together. I just couldn't understand the decision. So I don't know if this is going to turn into therapy. I'm happy to lay down, but do you understand the decision, or is this just Robert Jordan being Robert Jordan?
I think the problem here is that Robert Jordan is intentionally obscuring us from fully understanding the decision, right? Because what we get is Perrin thinking that he is leaving and never coming back. And then we get like a flashback of him fighting with Rand. But then by the end of the chapter, it's very apparent that he is here at Rand's behest, right? That Rand wants him here. He sent him to go to the Prophet. And so there's something about this that feels like I don't actually care that we missed the fight with Rand, which seems to be what Robert Jordan is flashing us into, but not giving us the full scene. I really wish we saw the scene where Rand was planning this with Perrin. And I think that without knowing how much of it was fake and how much of it was real and when did Perrin get the orders versus when did the fight break out, like it's really difficult from the way this chapter is set up to know all of the details. And that must be intentional by Robert Jordan to set it up this way. But until you know if or how it's paid off, I think it just kind of feels frustrating.
Yeah, and I think that's where I am left. And it's not like some kind of deep frustration like I threw the book across the room. I was just like, oh, okay. So we get 3 this week and there's kind of nothing much going on here. Although I assume you want to unpack some of those more specific things that maybe I don't understand the full resonance of, but you know, I'm happy to do it. I will pass it back to you with the first note in mind, verbatim in my journal is Loyal! Exclamation point. Where is our sweet boy going? And that's it.
Yeah.
That's all I really cared about this chapter.
I think that's about right. Loyal going kind of all over the map is exciting. It's interesting. And it makes me go, oh no, we're either going to get Loyal POVs or he's not going to be in this book for a while. And I suspect we both are worried that he's not going to be in these books for a while, but we kind of need to wait and see on that. The only other note I had there is that Loyal seems really concerned about 2 things. One is that Rand is sending everyone away, and Loyal is already seeing signs that he is kind of pushing Min away. But then second, it's the fact that Perrin tells Loyal to trust no one, and Loyal seems almost distraught to get that response from Perrin.
And I mean, I'm still just mostly upset about Loyal going away. So to take the first part of your comment, because that's the part I'm more interested in. You know, if the show were like driving the creation of the books, I'd be like, oh, this is to make the show cheaper. Let's get rid of the
save
heavy
the budget
of effects and just send him away for a long time. But I mean, there's something about this that feels like not just he won't be around the rest of the book. I feel like we're not going to see him for like 5 books or some, you know, and then
Right.
we'll come back and there will be a moment where he tells us all of all the travels he's been on and all that he's learned. But I think this is going to be a long break from him. Not that he's been very present for the last 2 books either, but you know, it's a little sad to me.
So I think this is actually a good point to note something, because this is kind of a weird pivot chapter for Loyal and for Perrin and for a bunch of characters. I don't have the exact number. I can maybe crunch the details and get it. But sometime between this week and the end of this book is when we hit the 50% mark for the entire series. And
Oh,
so
wow.
when we're now talking about like Loyal is going away for an extended period of time, we're at about the halfway mark. And so we've got to start thinking a little more about the end game than we had previously, kind of leading up to this. We're getting towards the back half as opposed to the front half of this series. So with Perrin kind of going off on his own to find the prophet, Loyal going off on his own to close the way gates, how kind of long term do you see these plots being? Because at this point in the game, if a plot lasts 4 or 5 books, that's most of the way through the rest of the series.
Well, and I don't know that we've really been able to say any single plot line so far, perhaps other than like Rand's life has taken 4 or 5 books, so that's probably a little bit exaggerated, but it does feel like a way to, if that's true, then we're like in the middle of the second act. So to push people away so that they can come back for the big finale seems about right. And some of those will separate them so they can all be reunited, and some of those will probably, not really see that much of in that time frame.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're saying Loyal, you're worried, or at least are thinking right now that he's going to be in that second category.
Yeah, I don't see him being a major POV character, like getting upgraded to one of the 4. So I think he's going away for a while.
Okay. The next thing that I wanted to note is that Perrin has a really interesting assortment of people with him. And I just kind of want to quickly run down this list. So the simple and probably not even worthy of comment is Aram, Fail, the Two Rivers folks, right? None of them seem surprising. The next on the list are 2 Ashaman. So it's worth noting this is Grady and Neild. Neild we really haven't been introduced to at all, other than his name has been mentioned. Grady was one of the Ashaman that Rand had met in his very first visit to the farm, and his wife Sora Grady is the one who Rand constantly thinks of as kind of like staring at him for letting her husband join the Ashaman. We also learn really interestingly here that the Gradys are bonded to one another, and so he is aware that she has a sore knee, for example. And I think that is a really interesting thing to be tracking, is we've been really worried about the Ashaman, especially with Taim at the head. But I'm really kind of curious about Grady in particular, who seems to be much more kind of like humanized in the way that he's being written than most of the other characters from that area.
Yeah, I would compound that with, again, that's one of the main signs. It's like, okay, well, they didn't have such a big fight that they're never going to speak again, right? Like this is still coordinated with Rand's effort because we have some Ashaman here, right? And then I think the other piece that folds into the fact that he's bonded with his wife, it made me, of course, think about Rand and how it was such an egregious thing that he was bonded without his permission, right?
Yeah.
Not to make light of any real world analogies, but that it felt like it was a very
Or a couple
serious
chapters from now analogies.
and so then it made me wonder about this relationship, and I don't think it's clearly said. Like it seems possible she consented to be bonded.
Yeah.
Like you're headed off to war, honey. Let's be bonded so we can keep in touch.
I think it's
but
even
it also
implied.
seems
That certainly seems to be the vibe.
yeah, and it does seem like I want to like put the Dark Tower folk into like easy like internet broy conservative bros buckets, and so I think I naturally went that way, like, well, maybe he didn't give her a choice, and it's like, you're my property. But I think I agree with you that it seems more the former than the latter, even though my head wants it to fit a stereotype.
Totally fair. Then we get 2 Aes Sedai, which just seems like bad news for Perrin, if nothing else. Like, that's probably very helpful in battle and in negotiation, but having to deal with 2 Aes Sedai who have sworn notably to Rand and not him seems like bad news bears. In addition to that, we then have Berelain, who you're so over talking about, but Perrin is probably the most over having in a 2-mile radius of him. So any thoughts on those last couple members of his retinue?
It just, again, the more factions you have represented, the harder it's going to be to do anything productive. And I understand that Perrin has been upgraded in terms of leadership, but like he was a leader of the two rivers facing an existential threat. And so it was very easy to kind of bring everybody together. This seems like a group that is going to be hard to govern and lead.
Yeah. And then we get kind of what feels like to me the twist at the end of the chapter is they're not here doing something to spite Rand. They are here seemingly on Rand's orders to figure out what is going on with the Prophet. And we haven't really met the Prophet other than one scene with Nynaeve in like 2 or 3 books ago. But I think that he has we've seen the way that he's loomed over an entire like corner of the map for quite some time now. And so I'm really interested to see where this plot goes, but I'm also not super confident we're going to get much of it in the rest of this book. What was your take on kind of the end of this chapter?
Well, I want just your stone cold clarification. So they have traveled, they were in Camelin?
Kyrian, but
Kyrian,
same region.
it was 50-50, and
Yeah.
And so they have traveled through a gate made by some of the Ashaman.
Correct.
To go do Rand's bidding. Where on the map did they travel to? Did we get a city name, or is it just we know this region?
We know the kingdom is Gaelden. So that is kind of south, I believe, maybe a little southeast of the two rivers. If you're looking for a point on your map, it's kind of right on the spine, near Johanna. If you're looking for something that might be clearer,
right on the spine is correct.
Exactly. So they're right there in that kind of Amadicia where the White Cloaks are, plus Altara, where Saladar was, and then north of there is Gaelden. That kind of triangle is the region that the Prophet has really been kind of disrupting over the course of the past few books.
And we also know that all of Terabon seems to be Shan-Chan territory now.
Exactly.
So they have
and Amadicia
really come close to the frontier.
Exactly. And Amadicia, right next to there, we just saw has been recently captured by the Shan-Chan. So they're right on the border of that.
Fun. Good neighborhood to be in. That makes me think we're headed towards some Shan-Chan battles at the end of this book.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We watched all of the Aes Sedai and Nynaeve and Elaine kind of vacate this space, and now suddenly we've been like, oh, Perrin is smack dab in the middle of it again. So it'll be interesting to see how that territory has changed in the past several books since we've been there. Any last thoughts here other than groan Barrelane before we move on to chapter 28?
Sounds like chapter 28 it is.
Bread and cheese, which actually is one of my favorite meals. I don't know what Mat is complaining about. Mat is upset to move into the palace, though his servants love it. The band approve as well, and Vanden notes an abundance of beggars at Caridin's, but doesn't seem anything else odd going on. Mat's barmaid is especially angry, and the cook at the inn warns Mat about what she calls squeezing too many melons, which I thought was hilarious. Mat's rooms are elaborate at the palace, and Mat is worried about the proximity to the queen, and then suddenly Tylin is there humming a very flirty song, and then she starts kissing him as Mat protests. Tom then arrives, and Mat insists that he come in. Tylin then jokes about the fact that she has undone his pants and leaves. Tom reports that Aviendha and Brigitte are watching Caridin, and Mat then checks on Ulver, who is flirting with all of the servants and seemingly having the time of his life. Mat is upset that they're encouraging him, and Elaine and Nynaeve then return, and Mat immediately orders that 2 men will accompany them at all times, and they seem to be excited to agree that it is a good idea, and Mat doesn't know what to make of that. Mat is then told to stake out a particular building, which he does from a bar, where, according to him, his job is to be ta'veren and make something happen. Julian wonders why they are in this location, but Tom is more concerned with why Elaine and Nynaeve were asking about Sital Anan. Mat watches women come and go out of the building, including several wise women, and Mat decides to walk down the alley near the building, but nothing happens. Mat then returns to a dinner invitation from the queen, and instead of going, he locks the doors to his room. He worries that she will break down the door, and Mat spends the night worried, but in the morning, the servants seem to know what is happening, but nothing else has gone on. Elaine and Nynaeve insist that Mat make a good impression on the queen, because she mentioned that he might be sick, and they insist that Mat keep on his observation of the building, saying that they are going to spy on Caridin. Vannon then notes that others are also watching Carradine. Avienda and Brigitte, he realizes, are under a disguise, but there was also an old man who keeps getting away without being noticed. Brigitte then begins to stake out with Mat, and Mat is surprised to find her more of a friend who acts like one of the men instead of someone who he could flirt with. He's also surprised to not be attracted to her at all, despite the fact that she is seemingly attractive. 2 days of stakeout pass uneventfully, and at one point, Elaine snaps at Mat and then begs his forgiveness, seemingly to please Avienda, who seems to approve of her begging. Tom reports that Carradine gives to beggars, but nothing else seems to be of note. Mat then goes to get food and is told that if he wants to eat, he must do it with the queen, and he is sent a note about a hungry bird. Mat then begins to bring home bread and cheese, but the cooks mock him, saying that the queen will feast on Duckling eventually, Duckling being one of his nicknames. He hopes that Tylin will find a new target over the holiday, but he wakes up with dice rolling in his head and knows that things won't be that easy. So this I found to be kind of a fun little Mat chapter where it could have been a third of the length and I would have been very happy.
Yeah, it was just thinking as your summary went on, and I mean that complimentary. I'm like, man, I guess a lot happened here, but also the end result is nothing happened here, right?
Yeah.
Like, or very little happened here. So, I'll offer as I pass it back to you with the thought that I made a note after this chapter that there are things that come and go in the Wheel of Time mythology. They get kind of focused on and then left behind. So like an example might be the bubbles of evil, which apparently
Yeah.
could still happen, but we haven't talked about in a very long time, right? But this felt like a moment where across these two chapters, Taviran is like they're hitting the Taviran bell very hard, right? That
Yeah.
like remember, remember, remember. So I found that in a kind of metagamey way to be very curious because I don't think that's one that's ever really left focus. Like it's always been
Yeah.
kind of present and it's very convenient. But here we have characters directly trying to exploit a Taviran essentially. And I believe we didn't really talk about it last chapter, but I believe Perrin noted a few things about being a Taviran at
Yeah.
different times or just passing references, nothing like major.
So I think the funny thing in this chapter is that Mat has at times tried to kind of take advantage of his luck or whatever it means to be Taviran for him, but it's very clear to me that it is Elaine and Nynaeve who are just like, oh, go be Taviran in the place we think important things will happen. And it's very clear, at least in this chapter, that ain't how it works. Mat basically goes and gets drunk next to what I'm pretty sure is Rienne Corley's shop multiple days in a row and absolutely nothing happens other than he realizes he's not attracted to Brigitte. I don't have too much to add to the overall arc of this chapter because there isn't much of one. What did you have overall, or were there any like details that you want to make sure we talk about first because they were the ones that got you excited?
Well, so some things from my notepad would just be, other than the Taviran being present, and I take your point that it's like now the other characters are trying to exploit it, and that never seems to work, right? That's kind of an old mythology rule, right? Um, and so I was then stuck a little bit on the Mat and the Queen thing, just kind of using that to mean the whole chapter, and
Which is fun
again,
in this chapter.
yeah, I decided for myself really, it has not been fully confirmed, but like this is the terrible woman, right? That he's supposed to avoid in my head. And so these like ways in which he's trying to get away from her to me are very funny because again, it's been presented as prophecy. So it's not even like, you can't avoid it. Again, the mythology trope.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And Tylin in this chapter very much dominates the early part of the chapter, so this is a nice transition to kind of where we get going, which seems to be, at least at first, it feels like a fun little game where Mat is like, hey, I think this lady's cute, I'm not going to go after her, but she's going to flirt with me, and then Tom shows up, and Mat's reaction is like, oh, good, I can get out of this, and then I get a little bit more, like, icky feeling about this. Like, I know this was written in the 90s, and Robert Jordan's supposed to make, I think that I'm going to laugh because Mat is getting the same treatment he gives to other women, but, like, I don't think Mat has ever, like, crossed the line of consent as far as we have seen in the way that Tylin seems to be here.
Yeah, and I will agree that it didn't really ring as like purely comedic. I mean, there's kind of slapsticky moments of like his pants are open, ha ha ha, but it did feel. I mean, the main word in my notes repeated is just silly. Like it all felt kind of like a farce. And so while I'm saying it's not funny, it's like it also just doesn't really seem to matter, right? I guess that's what
Yeah.
you're saying. It's played for laughs. It's not played as like this is a serious plot. Look out.
This feels like if you ever go back and watch, and don't tell our mutual friend I said this, if you ever go back and watch like the Bond movies from the 70s and you're like, okay, this is the 20 minutes that I forget about when I put this movie on. There's one of those in every old Bond movie. And this is kind of that scene for Wheel of Time as far as I'm concerned.
She
I know
seems
you
kind
like
of
Bond
Bond
too.
girlish too, right? Like I
Yeah,
don't know
that's
what you
fair.
would change her name to, but yeah, it feels like that.
So at this point, we get the Oliver update, which is he just loves the servants. He's having the best time. I have nothing else to say about this, but it's important to note when a character in the Wheel of Time is happy because it happens so infrequently.
I was thinking about ooh, he's a character in Andor. Is it Willimon? Where, the main characters in Andor kind of take this guy along with him, and when we flash forward to different years, he's just got a different girl in
Oh,
every
yeah.
scenario. And I'm like, oh, he's like a little Willimon. I think that's the right name, where it's like, oh, okay, he's just having a good time while our characters are suffering. So it works out.
Yeah, absolutely. The other note that we get like 5 times in this chapter is about Jaikim Carradine and beggars. We learn from Tom that Carradine is giving donations to beggars. We learn from Vannon that there are beggars all over the square where he is. We learn from, I think, Birgitta that they have run into multiple packs of beggars every time they go to look at Carradine. We are supposed to be paying attention to beggars. Hooray. I noted
I,
it.
I was thinking of Oliver Twist, where all the beggars are, working for a guy, right?
Yep.
So that struck me. Also, in Greg's stupid notes, we have Ja say it again,
Jaikim? Either one.
Jaikim Carradine, and in the other podcasting life I live, we have been talking a lot about Sentimental Value, which is a movie in the Oscar race this year, which is
Joachim Trier.
Joachim Trier, and I keep mixing up those two names when
That's awesome.
somebody will refer. I'm like, why are we talking about? Oh, right. So yes, awesome movie, awesome director. Definitely, if you haven't seen Worst Person in the World, check that out as to complete the tangent. But yeah, it's funny that just because those J names are not even the same name, but they're close enough and they're weird. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. Honestly, other than that, this is a chapter about Matt not getting any food because he won't sleep with the pretty old lady, and I don't really have anything to say about that. And then Matt becomes
We've all
friends.
been there. We've all
and then
been
Matt-
there.
We
So.
all have been there, yeah. And then we get Matt becoming friends with Birgitta and being like, "Oh my God, it's possible to not flirt with women." And I still haven't gotten there, but I can see how that would be a big moment. Don't leave
I
me
mean,
hanging on that joke.
I was laughing about it because I thought that's what you meant, and then I thought you were actually narrating in Matt's head. So then I was trying to figure out if I had laughed poorly before, therefore not leaving you. So he answered the "When Harry Met Sally" question.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
That's a perfect pull. I'm kind of mad I didn't think of that as I was reading this chapter. Good work.
Well, I'll have what he's having. Go ahead.
That's what I've got on this chapter, honestly.
I already
There's-
turned the page of my journal, so I guess that's what I have too.
29, The Festival of Birds. Matt wakes to the dice in his head, and Oliver is so excited about the festival. At this point, Tylin arrives, and Matt literally tries to use Oliver as a human shield. Matt says he is going to take Oliver out to the festival, and then Tylin summons Rizelle, one of the serving women who is apparently the most attractive woman Matt has ever seen, and she is dressed up for the Festival of the Birds, wearing basically nothing. Absolutely, Oliver says, "I will go with her instead of Matt. Go away, Matt." Matt is then, of course, left alone with the queen. She leads him eventually to the. She starts to give him orders, and then when he disagrees and they start to more or less argue about it, he reaches for her arm, and suddenly she has a dagger at his throat. She begins to give orders, saying that he started the rough events by grabbing her, and then he leads her into the bedchamber, and clearly a bunch of stuff happens. Later, he doesn't have any clothes on as she is getting dressed, and she insists that he enjoyed himself, but Matt says that he's supposed to do the chasing, not the woman. At this point, she leaves, and he looks for something to wear, and then he sees Tylin's gift, which is an earring and a request that he pierce his ear. Matt apparently should be the one giving presents, he thinks, not the woman. He then meets up with Brigitte and Nalshan, and unexpectedly Beslin joins them, who clearly doesn't recognize Brigitte in her festival dress, which is also very revealing. Matt calls out Brigitte for drawing attention, but she seems pleased by it, and Matt is surprised to once again find himself to have a female friend. The city is abuzz with music and near nudity all over, and they begin to toss coins to beggars as they wait, but Beslin tells them that one of them is not in the Beggars Guild, and so they shouldn't give him a coin. At this point, the false beggar immediately attacks Matt, and suddenly many of the nearby beggars begin attacking. Matt is nearly beaten when suddenly the legal beggars begin attacking the fake beggars, seemingly out of nowhere, but the guild always takes down those who are faking. Eventually they free, and Beslin says that the attack was Tavirin, and that's why he likes spending time with Matt. Eventually, they arrive at the same bar as the previous several days, but everyone is restless. Beslin says that Matt will be good for his mother, and he says that she has chosen Matt as her pretty, and he approves. Matt is so overwhelmed that he gets up, and then he sees a woman and begins following her without thinking about it, his head still in a daze. We then switch into Rienne Corley's POV, who watches Solane leave, followed by Matt, and she has waited 5 days to give the order based on a strong urge that she has felt for several days. She says they must move to the farm, everyone who is not currently a wise woman, and there is little discussion among the group because she is the eldest. And I think if you were looking for a reason why we talked up Tavirin so much, it's because the end of this chapter is Tavirin in action, and it's very easy to miss. What was your take on the Festival of Birds, which is most notable probably for all of the bosoms that are described?
You always just pass it to me on bosoms. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because there's a way in which I could imagine like myself as a teenager reading this and like giggling and being all happy, but it just feels a little childish to make everything about, oh, naked people in the street. Just imagine that world. And we've made these jokes about Robert Jordan before, but other than that kind of side of it, and virtue has been signaled. So then I will just say, it just felt like like you just said, what we're supposed to take away from this is when you ask for Taviran powers, they don't happen. When you're not paying attention, Taviran powers happen.
Yeah. You know what happens before Taviran powers happen? Rape.
All the stuff in the bedroom.
Legally rape. Like, I know Robert Jordan, I'm supposed to laugh at this and think it's so funny that Matt's getting a taste of his own medicine, but like, ew. I'll be honest. I think a couple of chapters or a couple of weeks ago, I referred to this as the best of plot lines and the worst of plot lines. If you could delete some of, let's say, 50% of the Tylin scenes from Matt's time in Ibu Dar, it is one of my favorite single character in city plot lines, period. But there's some real rough Tylin stuff in the middle that I always try to forget exists, except I've read all of the comments about it online. So there's a lot of space in my head devoted to the fact that, yes, this is rape and we need to not be okay with it.
Well, so obviously not discounting that whatsoever. And then you add to that the only refrain Matt gets is like, I'm supposed to be the one who does this. I'm supposed to be the one who does that.
Yeah.
And that just, I think, to a modern sensibility just seems silly, right? Like, we both have been out of the dating game for a long time, but like we understand men and women pay for things, men and women open doors, all those basics that are no longer questioned in any way. So, you add that as his only recourse is to be like, but I'm supposed to be the gentleman, it's just weird.
The idea that Matt has been flirting with barmaids for the past year and a half and also doesn't have any real conception that women are interested in sex is beyond impossible to me. Like, I do not understand that character constructed in that way.
Yeah, and so, I guess we're left. The only way I could reconcile a lot of this would be like Matt's not driving, but Matt's driving here, right? Like this is just horny teenage boy.
This is not good. Like, horny teenage boy lost the fight to Knife. That's where we're at in this discussion. Knife beats horny teenage boy. I mostly leave this scene then grossed out and wondering if Matt is actually going to pierce his ear. And then we get to what I consider the more interesting half of this sequence, or at least the half that I want to talk about, the trip through the city, which I think is most notable because of the fight with the beggars, mostly because I don't want to talk about the bosoms once again. So I enjoyed the
The words
idea.
that you're using the word bosoms too.
That's the
Sorry,
word
go ahead.
that he uses, good sir. I really kind of loved the moment where Beslin is like, hey, they're not a part of the Beggars Guild. And then it's very clear that they might have lost that fight if it weren't for the assistance of the Beggars Guild. That felt like really it paid off all of the references to there being way too many guilds in Ibudar that we had gotten earlier in this book.
I mean, I like the gag of the Beggars Guild. It really made me think here in Boston, and I think in a lot of cities, the like panhandling musicians, the buskers in the subway have to have a permit. So it felt like that, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the version I see in town is like you see a guy playing guitar, and sometimes somebody will come with their, their little badge that says they're a licensed busker and kick him out of the spot because he's not supposed to be there. And it all just feels silly and like I hate capitalism. But in this case, it's like, oh, good. The union is good for something.
See, I worked right downtown at the Common for about a decade. So the version of this I was thinking of is the homeless people who are like, no, this is my spot. Get out of
Oh,
it. And will
yeah.
like chase the other people out of it. Because it's like, no, no, no. I have claim to this corner. It is mine. And yes, it is theirs. I know exactly who has which spot
My
in the Common.
my favorite version of that is there was a guy in Harvard Square who, when I was like 20, he would already call me sir, like handsome sir, how are you? Handsome sir, good to see you today. Good spare change news, sir. And I, within the last 5 years, watched Good Will Hunting, and he's in the same spot
That's
behind
amazing.
them in Good Will Hunting. You can see him selling newspapers. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that. So, yeah. So yes, that is true in all of the Boston area, and I'm sure in a lot of cities too.
I think we're losing all of our red state readers by talking about how we all probably have favorite homeless people that we give all of our donations to. So like maybe we can move on from this. But yeah, this rang very true to me and was a pretty decent action sequence, right? Like I'm willing to get Matt and Brigitte fighting some people more or less any time as long as it's quick enough. And this met that condition. We then get them sitting at a bar, and then the funny moment where Beslin's like, hey, I think you and my mom are a cute couple. And that's funny. Any comments on the funny?
I mean, it felt like we'd slipped into like a Steve Martin movie or something, right? Like an Albert Brooks something. But yeah, it was funny.
But then the clear point is that it's enough to put Matt off balance to such a degree that he can act on instinct instead of acting consciously. And the second he does so, he just starts following a woman. And then we switch to another POV that confirms that that is a very important woman to be following. And so the fact that Matt has now more or less at random ended up following someone who is connected with the wise women, who was just in a meeting with all of seemingly the eldest, I think are the way they are referred to, of the kin. Like this is a big deal that he has seemingly kind of stumbled onto. And this is apparently how Taviran works, right? Because not only did he just happen to follow the right woman, the woman was only sent because Rien Corley felt a tug that caused her to want to make this decision.
Well, and it actually, this is the corner of the show each week where Greg confesses to be a bad reader. I'd kind of forgotten that Matt didn't meet all those women, right? Like
Okay, yeah.
that the kin is secret from Matt at the moment, or it was. And then I'm right to kind of piece together, then it feels to me like the women control the storehouse where the bowl is. Is this just me speculating, or is that like there's been
No,
150 clues?
not necessarily. So
Okay.
Matt is staking out a building, but we're not necessarily sure he's staking out the storehouse, right? So that's the question
Okay.
is he at another building that's associated with the kin, or is he just at the building Nynaeve was at, and his goal is to follow a random woman who goes to the storehouse, hopefully, because Nynaeve's convinced it exists, right? So I think it's 50-50 on that, but like it feels like Matt has at least stumbled on the right person to be following based on the narration we get after it, even if we're not entirely sure why they're the right person or where they're going to be going.
Okay. Good clarification.
I guess then what we get is this really interesting scene with Rien Corley, where she has apparently been debating giving the order for the past 5 days. The order seems to be related to Elaine and Nynaeve, and she seems kind of comfortable that she's waited because they haven't reappeared. But apparently she has been feeling an urge to give the order the past couple days, which matches up since a Taviran arrived outside of her window every day. And today she decided to give that order, and that is what sent her colleague away. That is the full extent of the details that we are given. I think I have completely summarized the entire first half of this POV. What do you make of those details? What do you think the order was, or what do you think Mat is getting himself into by arbitrarily following this woman?
It felt to me like a bad order. Like all the questioning of Nynaeve and Elaine's status felt like this must be them finally deciding, like, we're not actually going to put up with these pretenders and we're going to act on it. I don't have proof. I don't have support. That's just what my gut said.
Okay. No, that's totally fair. And we have nothing that I can say about this because I know the answer. The last thing that we hear is that the wise women are going to pull everyone out of the city who doesn't currently wear the belt and move them to the farm. And so this is really interesting because it means that Nynaeve and Elaine are now kind of on a clock. If this group knows something that they can get information about, it needs to happen more or less immediately because it seems like they're pulling out of the city very quickly. So this is, I think, a very important moment for the plot that we really can do nothing but speculate for what it means. So any speculation about what it means?
I am thinking still about, I know we're further on the map, but like the bigger threat of like the Shan-Chan and these forces pushing this direction on the map, whether it's, which piece of that group is there. So it felt like to me that, the kin just have stayed secret for so long, they want to remain secret. So they just want to get out of town before the town explodes like some kind of powder keg.
I think that's exactly right. And as you're bringing up the Shan-Chan, it's worth noting that a group of several hundred female channelers is not a thing that we necessarily want the Shan-Chan to be sneaking up on. That sounds
True.
real bad. I don't really have too much else to say about these 3 chapters. I think they pushed things forward, maybe not as entertainingly as what we had in the previous week, but I think there's enough here to make me feel like we've at least meaningfully moved the dial, even if it wasn't my favorite week to read. Is that your takeaway as well?
Yeah, I think this conversation made me appreciate them a little bit more. I think it's making me pretty certain that Ebu Dar will be wrapped up this book, right? That we're headed towards a climax here, and then we'll move on and get onto the list of perhaps more interesting plot lines. And so it makes me wonder about, like, do we really need 2 books to get to this kind of confrontation? But I'm open to it. We'll see what's happening and see what comes up next. So next week, of course, we just have 2 chapters. I don't know why I said of course, because we just had a 3-chapter one. But it's chapter 30, The First Cup, and chapter 31, Mashiara.
Mashiara is correct, and the fact that Greg doesn't know how that's pronounced means that he doesn't listen to the lyrics of the background music on the television show, because Mashiara has been repeatedly associated with a particular character, and they will be in that chapter.
When will we talk about that, Tyler?
Probably sometime in the future when we go through the glass columns. So ends another episode of Through the Glass Columns. We thank you for joining us and continuing with us on our quest to cover all of the Wheel of Time in our own sweet time.
This podcast features original content developed by Tylor Orm and Greg Cass and is not in any way affiliated with, associated with, or condoned by the Robert Jordan Estate, Tor Fantasy, Amazon, or our wives. All content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please seek out the books from your local bookshop or library and join us as we continue our journey. If you'd like to contact us to share your thoughts or give feedback, find us on Instagram or Threads by searching Through the Glass Columns.
Thank you once again for being a part of this community. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe, leave us a review wherever you are listening, and recommend this show on your social media to help us grow our community. We look forward to welcoming you back next time on Through the Glass Columns.